All right, so today's speakers for Yuba Water's Lunch and Learn on Flood Risk Reduction are Ryan McNally. He's our Water Resources Project Manager. He is a Yuba County native and joined the Yuba Water Agency last year. He was previously the General Manager for Browns Valley Irrigation District. John James, he's our Water Operations Project Manager here at Yuba Water Agency. And he is our, what I like to refer to, our resident atmospheric scientist. He works with our Forecast Informed Reservoir Operations Program, oversees flood risk reduction projects, including our secondary spillway that's currently in planning and design. And he was previously with PG&E before he joined Yuba Water Agency. And Tom Engler is also on the line. He's going to be available at the end for questions. He is a civil engineer and certified floodplain manager with MBK Engineers. We have a long relationship with Tom Engler, and he's been a huge support with our flood risk reduction efforts. So glad to have you here, Tom. And with that, I will go ahead and pass it off to you, Ryan, to get us started.
Hey, thanks, Bonnie. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. And I really want to thank you for spending your lunch hour with us to learn more about flood risk reduction in Yuba County. Again, as Bonnie said, my name is Ryan McNally, and I'm a project manager for the Yuba Water Agency. And one of my primary roles is to ensure we remain invested in and strengthen our position in programmatic flood risk reduction to protect everyone in the county. It's also important to mention that much of the work we're doing creates a tremendous benefit toward protecting our neighbors in the region, especially with some of the major operational projects we're going to talk about today. For today's discussion, we're going to start with a little bit of history to revisit some of the more notable flood events in Yuba County and quickly jump ahead to some of the things we're doing now for flood risk reduction. And as we wrap up, we'll have plenty of time for questions. But another thing I want to touch on, and I think it's pretty clear to all of us, is that we're heading into another drought. And I think right now is the perfect time to talk about flood risk since the water's not lapping at our door, so to speak. Before we dive in, though, I want to briefly explain a term you'll hear throughout today's presentation, and that's levels of protection. You may read about this in the newspaper, hear about it on the news, but today you're going to hear the terms 100, 200, or even 500-year levels of flood protection. Well, what does that really mean? Well, that number really represents a percentage of likelihood that flooding will occur in any given year consistent with the probability of its value. For example, a 100-year level flood event is so large and so rare that we could reasonably expect for it to occur once per every 100 years, or simply 1% chance in any given year. The same thing holds true with 500-year events. They're much larger in magnitude and that much more infrequent, and can reasonably be expected to occur once in every 200 or 500 years. So a 200-year event is 0.5% each year, and a 500-year event is a 0.2% chance of occurring in each year. But at the end of the day, it's a value given to illustrate the magnitude of flood events. Federal and state agencies use this number to determine how safe an area is, what kind of structures can be built there, the cost of insurance premiums, et cetera, et cetera. It's really just a measurement of the probability of those events occurring in each year. But because this is a way to identify the size of such events and not the frequency of occurrence, it's kind of misleading because events could theoretically occur multiple years back to back. It's really kind of a gamble. It's just all a probability. But in order to understand where we are, I'd like to take a look back in time to revisit where we've been. So, Yuba County flood history. I think everyone here knows that we are surrounded by three major rivers: the Yuba, the Feather, and the Bear Rivers. And in a lot of respects, our region is defined by these rivers, and it can be easy to forget about how productive and flashy they can be, especially in the winter months. There have been more than 30 major events in the Sacramento Valley between 1805 and 1997. And that flooding was only exacerbated by the accumulation of silt from the historic hydraulic mining operations from the mountains above us. In fact, the Yuba River was at one time deep enough to accommodate steamships at Marysville, but the debris from hydraulic mining eventually raised the riverbeds in some places higher than the city of Marysville itself, if you could believe that. But to defend against this threat of flooding, our predecessors built levees to protect the community, but they were kind of built in a piecemeal fashion. They did their job, but they obviously could have been better. Being that they were better than nothing, there was a lot of room for improvement in terms of engineering standards, and they didn't always hold the water back as intended. Slide, please. So, Yuba County's flood history has been documented since the record keeping began in the late 1800s. But really, Christmas Eve 1955 was the catalyst for the Yuba Water Agency and the Yuba River Development Project. And this project was responsible for constructing the new Bullards Bar Dam just above Dobbins on the North Fork of the Yuba River in Yuba County. And although this project was not without controversy in the years leading up to it, the 1955 flood that threatened Marysville and much of Yuba County and caused tremendous damage and loss of life in neighboring Yuba City and Sutter County was a sobering reminder that motivated the people of Yuba County to take flood control into our own hands. And although this project was conceptualized in the years leading up to the flood, it literally took hell or high water to muster the resolve to construct this enormous and unprecedented local project on the Yuba River. So on a personal note, every Christmas, my grandmother recalls the story of when her family was evacuated from their home on Diver Street in East Marysville to the downtown Hotel Marysville. She remembers watching the army of volunteers who gathered to save Marysville from the hotel window, knowing that her dad, who was my great-grandfather, was one of the men filling and stacking sandbags on the D Street Bridge. Although it's kind of funny in hindsight, she also recalls her childlike worry of Christmas ruined and insisting that her parents move all the gifts from under the Christmas tree to the top of the coat closet before they left home that night. So what seems like a lifetime ago to some still haunts those who lived through that catastrophe of not knowing if they or their city were going to make it. And if you don't mind, just, take a close look at that photo of Marysville surrounded by water, because we're going to come back to that again in a couple minutes. Slide, please. So another important flood event, this occurred in February of 1986. As I mentioned, water on the levees is nothing new in Yuba County, but as the overflowing river started to recede from what seemed to be an endless rain that winter, a 150-foot section of the levee near present-day Walmart crumbled and caused catastrophic flooding to the community of Linda, which ultimately killed 2 people and destroyed 4,000 homes and businesses. What I really like about the picture in the slide is what was once the Peachtree Mall still stands as a reminder of how a local economy can be devastated in less than a day. Moving forward a little bit, in 1990, Yuba Water requested Congress and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to act and urge them to help bring 200-year level of flood protection to Yuba County. The devastating flood of 1986 was the catalyst for the $500 million Yuba River Basin project, where the Corps of Engineers, DWR, and the Central Valley Flood Protection Board endeavored to repair and construct more levees to mitigate this risk. Slide, please. And finally, that brings us to January of 1997. So who here today remembers when El Nino, La Nina, and Pineapple Express became household names? Just after the new year, an atmospheric river melted a near record snowpack and created a devastating amount of runoff in Northern California. And all that water coming down the western slope of the Yuba and Feather rivers quickly overwhelmed the system and caused multiple levee failures in the Central Valley. Near present-day Plumas Lake, a section of levee on the Feather River failed, claiming 3 lives and nearly 1,000 homes, further emboldening the Yuba River Basin project, which received congressional authorization and paved the way for many projects we see today. This was the second time my family evacuated to the foothills to escape floodwaters, and it impacted me so deeply that even today the term "the next time we evacuate" is factored into our household planning 24 years later. Now that I've set the stage for some of the risk, let's dive into some of the things we're doing right now to help mitigate that risk. So, one of the main missions or the core principles of the Yuba Water Agency is flood risk reduction. And like any mission, it takes good planning and key partners to put that plan in action. As we move forward and streamline our flood risk reduction program, there are 5 initiatives that encompass the projects that Yuba Water is currently invested in and will continue to get us to 100 and 200-year levels of flood protection. These goals are achieving a 200-year level of protection for urban areas and a 100-year level of protection for agricultural areas throughout the county, to identify the status of current and ongoing flood risk reduction projects, to identify opportunities for coordination and to unify smaller improvement projects for increased efficiency, to develop a long-term plan that identifies various needs and opportunities to further reduce flood risk to the county, and to develop a long-term plan to complete the construction and repairs to achieve that reduced risk. So when it comes to levees, many people might not realize that Yuba Water doesn't actually own or operate any. In reality, the levees in our area are owned and operated by various local jurisdictions and reclamation districts. Our role has really been more to collaborate and partner with these agencies, and more importantly, help them build the funding needed to improve these facilities. Some of our local partners include the Three Rivers Levee Improvement Authority, the Marysville Levee Commission, excuse me, and Reclamation District 784, 10, 817, and 2103. I would be remiss if I didn't also acknowledge our state and federal partners at the Central Valley Flood Protection Board and the Department of Water Resources and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Excuse me. So the agency and its partners have and continue to work hard to help make sure our county is protected from floodwater. Our community is very fortunate to follow in the steps of forward-thinking leaders who have carried the torch to protect our county. And through these partnerships, we have leveraged over $500 million in state and federal funding to build projects to improve the safety of Yuba County. Slide, please. So just a real quick summary of some of the things we have just in numbers. We have 2 ongoing flood risk reduction programs, 13 flood risk reduction projects that are complete or in construction, 3 studies that are well underway, and 4 projects that are in the planning or design phase. These are all projects that are real and tangible efforts to further reduce the risk of flooding. That's not to mention the projects that our partners have already completed. Slide, please. For those of you living in South Yuba County, you might be aware of the Bear River and Feather River setback levees constructed by the Three Rivers Levee Improvement Authority and maintained by Reclamation District 784. The Bear River setback levee was completed in 2007, and the Feather River setback levee was completed in 2010. These 2 levees are part of a larger system designed to bring a 200-year level of flood protection and lower the flood stage by 1 foot on the Bear River and 3 feet on the Feather River. It's pretty substantial. Slide, please. So moving along into current and ongoing projects, the Marysville Ring Levee is a major levee repair effort led by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to repair the 7.5-mile ring levee surrounding the city. It's important to keep in mind this levee protects more than 12,000 people, and when complete will give the city 200-year level flood protection to help ensure permitting for new businesses, residential development, and lower cost flood insurance. Slide, please. So the map on the screen right now illustrates the different phases of the project, and the segments in color represent the remaining work. The segments in gray show what has already been completed. And so right now, if you drive out of Marysville on Highway 20 toward the foothills, you'll notice work underway on phase 3, which is identified in green on the map. Now, if you recall the photo from the 1955 flood, which I think is going to come up here in just a second, yeah, up here in the upper right-hand corner, you can see how important this project really is. You know, obviously it's hard to imagine in a year like this, but it doesn't take much to surround the city with water. So this is a tremendously important project for the city of Marysville. Slide, please. So the Yuba Goldfields levee is another critical project for the county, and this will help us achieve that 200-year level flood protection as well. The Three Rivers Levee Improvement Authority is currently wrapping up a new levee that will extend along Hamilton-Smartville Road to high ground near Beale Air Force Base that will protect against potential breaches out in the Goldfields. Slide, please. So the Bear River setback levee is another setback levee on the Bear River west of Wheatland and will repair critical erosion damage in several pipe crossings. And we expect this project to be complete in 2022. Slide. So the Hallwood Side Channel project, this project will remove 3.2 million cubic yards of sediment from the lower Yuba River and will lower water surface elevations and velocities during high water events to reduce stress on levees. Additionally, this project will enhance 157 acres of natural habitat to restore historical floodplain processes, really making it a win-win. This project is interconnected with the North Training Wall project, which we'll talk about here in just a second, but it should be noted that because Tykert is a partner on this, I also want to recognize their $72 million in-kind service which really is an enormous advantage toward getting this critical project done. I mean, that's huge. This project, it really wouldn't be possible without that in-kind service. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so this slide also shows the progress of the Hallwood Side Channel project, which you can really see the magnitude of sediment removal from the before, during, and what it's going to look like after. So it's really, it's a heavy lift out there. Slide, please. The North Training Wall project, as I just touched on, this is really closely tied to the Hallwood the Side Channel project. And this is a project that's being undertaken by the Three Rivers Levee Improvement Authority, and it's what it's going to do is it's going to reshape and extend the North Training Wall to provide additional flood protection to Hallwood, Marysville, and District 10. And this is all occurring in the same area just below Daguerre Point on the Yuba River. And this project we expect it to be done by 2031. So in addition to the projects that I just talked about, and some of the smaller projects we didn't list, and there's a lot going on right now. But we're also collaborating with our partners to develop the Bear River Corridor Management Plan, the Feather River Management Plan, and the Agricultural Floodplain Task Force. Slide, please. So really, this is one of my favorite slides because it illustrates the many projects that Yuba Water's invested in toward achieving that 200-year flood protection for urban areas and 100-year flood protection for agricultural areas. But I also want to say that, in addition to the safety of Yuba County, our economic prosperity is at stake as well. It's important to know that there's currently legislation in the state to prohibit building in the floodplains with less than a 100-year level flood protection. So these projects are helping the county prepare for those limitations. Slide, please. So I think the last handful of slides have given a pretty broad brush view of some of the projects intended to help protect us from high water. However, my colleague, John James, who is the Water Operations Project Manager at Yuba Water, is working on some really awesome projects that will put the agency at the tip of the spear and possibly even give us the insight and ability to respond to floods before they even occur. Mr. James?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I'm John James, and I'm the Water Operations Project Manager for Yuba Water Agency. And as Bonnie mentioned, my background is in atmospheric science, water management, and hydroelectric operations. I manage many of the agency's operational flood risk reduction programs that I'm excited to share with you today. For background, I wanted to first talk about the Forecast Coordinated Operations Program, known as FCO, and the agency's involvement. Following the 1997 floods, studies were conducted and recommended improvements in coordination of the flood operations between New Bullards Bar and Lake Oroville. This led to the creation of the Yuba Feather FCO program and Lake Oroville and New Bullards Bar Reservoir operating in coordination to improve flood protection with the Yuba Feather River system. And since 2005, the FCO program has been really a successful partnership in achieving the objectives of operating the reservoirs in a coordinated fashion to reduce the flood risks, enhancing communications for downstream flood emergency needs, and providing a common decision support system. This strong partnership between local, state, and federal agencies, including Yuba Water, DWR, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and the National Weather Service, makes the program highly collaborative and has been key to its success. As you see, this program has provided the foundation for the future flood initiatives and enhancements the agency is working on. Next slide, please. So this slide is showing the geographic representation of Lake Oroville and New Bullards Bar Reservoirs and the Yuba Feather system in relation to the downstream locations that are impacted by their coordinated operations, including the cities of Yuba City, Marysville, and others within Yuba County. The primary drivers for the coordination of the operational flood flow limits from the confluence of the Yuba and Feather rivers down through the confluence of the Feather and Bear rivers. Next slide, please. So in 2019, in order to continue to enhance the strong partnerships and flood risk reduction efforts the FCO program created, DWR and Yuba Water invested an initial $2 million in a new initiative called Yuba Feather Forecast Informed Reservoir Operations, or FIRO. You may have been hearing a lot about FIRO lately, but what is FIRO? FURO is broadly defined as a flexible water management approach that uses data from watershed monitoring and improved weather forecasting to help water managers selectively retain or release water from reservoirs. It really supports decisions about how much water to keep during dry periods or how much to release prior to storms. The Yuba Feather FURO project is the third FURO project within California and is unique in a few ways. It's the first FURO program to primarily focus on flood risk reduction, and also the first to utilize FURO in a multi-reservoir system. Sonoma Water Agency and Orange County Water District also have FURO projects currently in place. The focus of the Yuba Feather FURO program is primarily on flood risk reduction, but it also has the potential for water supply benefits. And the program seeks to achieve two main goals. One, to improve operational meteorological and hydrological forecasts, and then integrate those forecasts into improved reservoir operational rules for flood risk reduction and public safety. FURO established a new partnership with Scripps Institute of Oceanography Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes, or CW3E. And CW3E specializes in state-of-the-art research into atmospheric rivers, which are the main type of storm that causes large flood events in our region. And as Ryan pointed out, were the cause of some of the historic flooding in 1986 and 1997. Next slide, please. So what really are atmospheric rivers, and what do atmospheric rivers have to do with FURO? Well, it turns out in California, and specifically in our region, being able to accurately predict atmospheric rivers is the key to successfully implementing FURO. Here's a brief video from Scripps that explains a little bit more on atmospheric rivers.
Hey, John, just a second. This is Bonnie.
Thanks, Bonnie.
John, I think we may be stuck on this slide, so we might need to move on. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's no problem. I think we can include that in the links later on. But atmospheric rivers are essentially, think of them as large rivers of water vapor in the sky. They contribute to over 90% of our floods in the region and can provide up to 50% of the water supply. They can carry as much water vapor as 25 times the Mississippi River, and historical terms like Pineapple Express refers to specific types of atmospheric rivers. So working closely with our partners at Scripps, the Yuba Feather FURO partners are focusing on improving atmospheric river forecasts in several ways specific to our area. And these include new permanently installed weather and soil moisture stations. Since the program started in 2019, we've added 7 additional stations in the watershed, and 5 are currently transmitting real-time data. It also includes weather balloon launches called radiosondes during atmospheric river events. And we have established a launch site just east of Marysville at one of our facilities that the Scripps team is using. And it also includes observation flights over the Pacific Ocean by the US Air Force and NOAA using sensors called dropsondes to measure atmospheric rivers during their development. And these are the same planes that are used to fly into hurricanes along the East Coast. All these observations feed into real-time global weather computer models, and this means they're already improving weather forecasts by adding additional and higher resolution data. One recent example I'd like to highlight is the latest installation of a weather station at Browns Valley Elementary School. This new station was installed last month, just east of Marysville, and will not only provide important data for the FURO program, but scientific information and applications for the students of the school. This collaboration brings together Yuba Water's partnership with Scripps to support our educational outreach and flood risk reduction programs. In addition, the FURO program is also looking to better understand soil moisture conditions, freezing level, and rain on snow impacts on reservoir runoff flows in order to better predict them in the future. Next slide. So the formal reservoir flood operating rules for Oroville and New Bullards Bar fall under the Army Corps' water control manuals. These are the same rules that are used by the partners as part of the FCO decision support system. Currently, the rules are primarily based on the time of year and generally do not include provisions to use specific forecasts to inform releases. So to integrate these new rules, Yuba Water and DWR are working with the Corps to support updating the manuals at New Bullards Bar in Lake Oroville. Along with integrating FIRO, the manuals are being updated to be more adaptive and take advantage of improving forecasts now and into the future. The FIRO program and the updates to the manuals are being highly coordinated and aligned as they progress together in parallel. This process of developing FIRO and water control manual updates at the same time is another unique aspect of our program. The alignment of the two programs in the Yuba Feather has been so successful, it's actually being envisioned by the Corps as the model process for future joint FIRO and water control manual update efforts. Next slide, please. So improved forecasts and operating rules are important enhancements. However, to achieve the full benefits of FIRO strategies, it requires the capability and flexibility to release water at the reservoir itself. Currently at New Bullards Bar, there's only one primary spillway outlet that is situated relatively high in the dam. And during the storm events, the reservoir must fill above the current outlet before water can adequately be released. This means that even with a reliable forecast, we may not be able to release the full amount of water we would like ahead of these large storm events. Due to this, Yuba Water is planning a new secondary spillway that is designed to be able to operate under FIRO and will increase the flexibility in managing the reservoir. The spillway gates will be 31 feet lower in elevation, allowing for significantly improved release capability. The spillway will be able to create additional flood storage space ahead of flood events, which can then be used to hold back the flood flows during the peak. In fact, it will be able to release 35,000 cubic feet per second when the reservoir elevation is at the top of the conservation space. Independently, this doubles the current capacity at the same elevation. Next slide, please. So some of the benefits of the spillway include it being an additional and flexible outlet to pre-release water ahead of large storm events, the potential to reduce downstream water levels by an additional 2 to 3 feet, and this would increase the level of protection downstream between 1 and 300 years. Next slide. So this image is showing the approximate location of the new spillway, which is at the left abutment of New Bullards Bar Dam, adjacent to the existing spillway. And it's actually near the overlook north of Marysville Road. Next slide. So recently our design has progressed to 30% milestone, and these are the current drawings of the spillway control structure and the spillway chute. The current design consists of 2 sets of gates, each with a vertical isolation gate for maintenance activities and a radial gate for regulating flow. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the planned spillway can reduce the magnitude and duration of stressful flows on the downstream system. And as an example, this comparison shows the blue line, the actual flow measured at the Feather River below the confluence of the Yuba during the 1997 flood. And the red line, a preliminary simulation of the same event with FIRO and a secondary spillway under a coordinated operation between Oroville and New Bullards Bar. As you follow the red line, you will see the increased amount of water released ahead of the main part of the storm, allowing for a decrease in the peak flows around the January 2nd and 3rd time frame when compared to the historical event. This illustrates there's a potential to decrease the peak river levels by 2.5 feet, dramatically reducing the flood risk. Next slide, please. So you may ask, why is lowering the stage level in the river important related to downstream flood protection? Stage reductions dramatically reduce the hydrostatic stresses on the levees. Historically, many of these levee failures have occurred not due to overtopping, but due to piping and undermining due to the strains from the pressure of the water in the channel. Lowering the river stage during the flood reduces this pressure and extends the effectiveness of the levee protection. And this also supports the lifespan of the recent levee projects that Ryan discussed earlier in the presentation. Next slide, please. So how is the secondary spillway important as it relates to climate change? On average, California already has the most variable climate in the United States. And to illustrate this, we only need to look at the pattern of the last decade. From 2012 to 2015, California experienced one of the worst droughts since the 1970s. And in 2017, the climate pendulum swung the other way, and we had the most precipitation since records were kept in some areas of Northern California. Now in 2020 and 2021, California is entering another drought that could be potentially worse than one we had only a few years ago. So what does this mean? Well, climate change forecasts indicate that periods of wet and dry extremes may increase in magnitude and frequency. Essentially, the wet periods will be getting wetter and the dry periods will be getting drier. Overall, temperatures will likely become warmer, allowing for more precipitation to fall as rain versus snow, especially in flood events. And rain and warm winds at higher elevations during atmospheric rivers may contribute to additional melting of snowpacks, further increasing the flood potential. By using FERO and the latest technologies in forecasting, the secondary spillway can release water days ahead of these large flood events, thus minimizing the impacts to downstream communities. It can also be used to better manage storage at higher levels in the reservoir during drier periods. The spillway really acts as a climate resiliency tool that, when coupled with FERO operations, can help mitigate the impacts now and into the future. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, the FCO program is the foundation for the new programs, regional partnerships, and future coordinated reservoir operations. In the future, FERO operations of Oroville and New Bullards Bar through the FCO program will allow for the optimal use of this innovative water management strategy. The related efforts of the FERO program, the updates to the Army Corps manuals, and the secondary spillway all act to enhance the FCO program and continuously improve the platform for decision-making and reservoir coordination. The many benefits of these programs include enhanced institutional partnerships, reduced flood risk, water availability improvements, and climate change resilience. Next slide, please. So a few additional projects I wanted to mention. The agency is partnering with Yuba County in developing a real-time inundation mapping tool. The tool will provide the Yuba County emergency management personnel with real-time information on potential levee failures and the corresponding flood inundation. The project is currently in a feasibility study phase with the goal of being completed hopefully by next year. This is another example of a state-of-the-art project to support public safety in the county related to flood risk. And finally, at Yuba Water, we're always looking ahead and taking proactive approaches to achieving and maintaining our missions. And envisioning flood risk reduction in the future, we've commenced a comprehensive flood risk management study to look forward to the next 5, 10, or even 20 plus years to identify and prioritize the next projects and additional steps we should be taking. This study will help further refine and update our strategic flood plan and ensure we are planning for the future of Yuba County. Slide, please. So in summary, reducing flood risk for the people of Yuba County is a core mission of the Yuba Water Agency. Many programs, projects, and partnerships working together to advance the 100, 200-year level of protection and beyond. And current and future era of climate extremes calls for bold and long-term investments. And this includes the planned secondary spillway at New Bullards Bar, along with the water control manual updates and the implementation of FERO, and will significantly enhance our public safety and climate resiliency. And with that, on behalf of our Yuba Water team, I want to thank everyone for listening today, and I'll pass it back to Bonnie for any questions.
Thanks, John. So we do have a few questions coming in. If you have questions, you can use the Q&A feature in Zoom. So just go ahead and drop your questions there. One of the questions we got, I think maybe for you, Ryan or Tom, somebody asked about the sediment from the Hallwood floodplain restoration project. Where does all the sediment that Tykert's taking, where does that go?
Yeah, so I think I can handle that one. So a lot of that is just aggregate that actually Tykert can use in their construction operation. So it's really being repurposed. I mean, it's you know, Tykert, you know, they pull a lot of aggregate out of the area, and that's what they do there. I mean, that's why their plant's out there. It's near that area, and they're using this rock to be used for sale and in their construction.
Great, thank you. We also got a question about the secondary spillway, asking if it will contribute to our hydropower operations, if it will generate electricity. Maybe John, you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, the secondary spillway will not have an impact on the hydroelectric operations, so there will be no addition of any generator related to the spillway project itself. It would just be an outlet.
Okay, great. And what was the timeline again for the secondary spillway? Should people look for an update this year, next year?
Right. So currently our board of directors is committed to the design and permitting phase of the project. We estimate right now that construction could start around 2024 with a 3-year construction window. However, no specific construction schedule has been set as of yet.
Great. Let's see, any other questions coming in? Ryan, we also had a question earlier about the kind of who owns, how do the levees work in Yuba County? So kind of what is our role and how do we fit in with the levee districts?
Absolutely. So the levees are owned locally by reclamation districts, or in the case of Marysville, the Marysville Levee Commission. So throughout the county, there's various reclamation districts, and I know Mr. Engler, I don't know if you want to step in here and explain how that dynamic works, but the agency's role really is a support role. I mean, it's to provide funding, to provide support, you know, wherever we can. You know, again, as I mentioned, we don't own the levees, we don't own those facilities, but we're very much invested in toward you know, improving them, or you know, identifying deficiencies there and you know, addressing those and helping the local reclamation districts, you know, find ways to repair or improve their system. Tom, did you have anything on that as well? I mean, it's a better explain.
Yeah, I'll chime in a little bit there, Ryan. Thank you. Tom Engler with MBK Engineers. Yes, so the federal flood control project was constructed back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, turned over to the state of California in 1953. The state of California told the federal government, we assure you we will take care of these levees. And then the state government turned around and delegated that authority to all of the existing local reclamation districts so they could maintain local control of their levees. So they're responsible for operations and maintenance, and the state is responsible to the federal government to make sure that's happening. So the water agency supports the locals in being able to do major repair projects. The local reclamation districts are still responsible for maintaining those projects.
Thanks, Tom.
Great, let me see if there's any other questions. It looks like those are all the questions we have right now. Ryan, John, Tom, is there anything else you'd like to offer or share based on today's presentation or our flood risk reduction efforts underway?
Yeah, you know, I just want to circle back to the floods we've lived through and have heard stories about. If there's one thing we can be sure of, we know they're going to happen again. And as much as we would like for those types of events to remain locked safely away in the history books, they aren't. And our community will have to endure more catastrophic flooding in the future, and we know this to be true. So one thing that I think is really cool is near the intersection of 1st and B Streets in Marysville stands a monument to W.T. Ellis. And W.T. Ellis is often credited as the father of the Marysville levee system. But the monument quotes Mr. Ellis in saying, history always repeats itself. Remember the winter of 1861 to 1862. Always be prepared, always be alert, and always watch the tricky Yuba. So what Mr. Ellis was referring to is one of the largest flood events on record, when in late 1861 and early 1862, a large part of the Central Valley was completely inundated. So really, you know, we're working hard and investing to be in a better position to protect our county and our neighbors from that inevitable rainy day. And we know it's coming. Our intent really is to make sure everyone knows that this is one of our primary missions at Yuba Water. This is what we do. And then I think with that, if there's any more questions or, you know, yeah, that's all I have.
Great, thank you so much. John, Ryan, anything, or John, Tom, anything else you wanted to add before we log off?
I just add real quick, Ryan, that I really appreciate you describing the historical perspective, and the way that our planning is working, we're considering the impacts that climate change could have, and enhancing some of these historically significant floods into the future. And so as we think about that and put those two pieces together, I think we're doing really great things here in the county and for the region.
Yeah, thanks, John. And the stuff that that you touched on too, man, it's just absolutely mind-bending. That some of the you can really geek out on a lot of this, the science behind this, and we could potentially be in a position where we prevent these events from really impacting the levees, and we can plan for them way out ahead of time. That something that's really unprecedented. I just think it's the coolest stuff ever.
Well, thanks, everyone. This is Dee Dee. I just want to give a quick plug if I could, because I think there's so much happening with regards to our flood risk mission. It would be great if we could encourage people to sign up for our newsletter. You can go to our website. You can sign up for our quarterly newsletter, and you'll be able to stay informed. You can also follow us on Facebook, and there's lots more information like this on our website, yubawater.org. So make sure you check those options out to stay informed.
Great, thank you, Dee Dee. And we will go ahead and follow up with the attendees and those who registered but were unable to attend today with a recording of today's presentation. And we'll also make sure that the link to that atmospheric river video is included so you all can see what the atmospheric rivers look like in action and kind of how they're categorized by the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. So with that, thank you all so much for coming and taking the time and spending your lunch hour with us. And keep an eye out for an email. And yes, I second what Dee Dee said. Check out our website, yubawater.org, our social media for updates and for future lunch and learns. Thanks, everyone.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.